Namaste everyone, how's it going? How to know if someone is suffering from depression? I know a lot of you guys are curious about my story, but we are not going to talk about my story. We are going to talk about what I have learned through my story, or rather through my journey. And I'm just going to try to share a few things so that people are better able to handle the kind of situation which comes around to a lot of people nowadays, which is that either a family member or friend seems to be depressed, and what ends up happening is that you, despite being concerned as a friend or a family member, are helpless. You are more afraid of trying to figure out what is wrong with the person and having a heart to heart talk with them, compared to that person who's going through the stuff themselves. First, I want to tell you how I look at mental health, all right, because this is probably the first of a bunch of videos that I'm planning on making around this topic. I look at mental health as something like a spectrum with an equilibrium point in between, which is that point where you as an organism can be classified as completely clinically sane, and you can eat shit, like do all that normal stuff on your own completely properly. Your mental faculties are working fine, your cognition ability, all that, everything is fine, all right. But from that equilibrium point, I would see a line going this way and a line going this way, all right. One would be the positive end and one would be the negative end, all right. So the positive end is something which we've spoken a lot about on this channel, where we've tried to discuss different kinds of tactics or hacking techniques to improve as a person when it comes to our brain power, our potential, and realize better things in life, and build up on top of that state of equilibrium. But today let's talk a bit on the negative side of things, which is basically how, if you lose that equilibrium and start going towards this way, what ends up happening is that you become psychotic, or you become depressed, or you become neurotic, or one of those things. And obviously, I'm not a doctor to look after the negative side of things, but I am a coach who helps people sort out the future and become and reach further on that positive side of things, be it with whatever, women, success, career, life, all that shit. But let's get down to the signs, all right. The first and most important sign which you need to look out for is that whatever a person had interest in, whatever the activities were which a person used to enjoy, they start losing interest in them. So for me personally, it happened in the cases of food, all right. I no longer look forward to like eating, and I love picking out. I have a bad ass sweet tooth and stuff like that, so I completely lost interest in all of that. Like the sensations which I should be getting, the satisfaction which I should be getting through enjoying food, for example, no, wasn't happening. Another very important thing in my life is training. It's my form of meditation, so to speak. So that is the second thing which I completely lost interest in, all right. I would just keep skipping the gym, and it wasn't laziness or lethargy. It was just like you stop looking forward to the things which you can't wait to do normally, all right. And the third for me was sex. That's another big part of my life which was impacted, and even now is considerably impacted, I would say. The second thing is, you would notice a change in the behavioral patterns of the person, their eating routines, their sleeping routines, their work routines, like just the clockwork according to which an organism works in the environment. That clockwork gets completely disrupted and unstructured and very randomized, all right. So if a person was living a particular kind of life, you would notice that behaviorally that person's kind of life has changed quite a bit. They would start doing random stuff, and they would doing stuff which kind of seems off, all right. This could be like with me. What had happened is, now I didn't turn out to be an alcoholic, luckily, but what happened is that I started like in the middle of the night, I would play music at full blast in my room, and I would just take one drink and I would just sniff that drink and smell it and this thing, and it was like my way of just somehow escaping or running away or just feeling the music and like trying to express through my body as much as possible. That's something very interesting. I'll just come to that, actually, that expression through the body. I'll just come to that. That kind of a behavioral change was very weird, because you wouldn't normally expect that from a person whom until recently was working in a certain pattern, or according to a certain pattern, in a particular kind of a cycle, and that behavior, that pattern gets disrupted. That's the second thing. Third thing, according to me, would be basically you, or the person whom you are thinking about, gets all up in their head, all right. They get cut off from the rest of the body. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean, you start thinking so much, right? Especially because you need to understand that a lot of people don't realize themselves that they could be depressed, all right, because they have been experiencing the whole thing, right? So it's very minute changes on a day-to-day basis, but you who sees them, let's say once or twice a week or once or twice a month, you go like, okay, like the person has changed quite a bit, so you can notice that stark difference. But for them, the guy who's going through that journey each and every single day, it's not the same. It's very different. All right. So the thing is, they're all up in their head and they have an idea that, all right, something is wrong, but they cannot trace back as to what is causing that wrong, what has led them to come to this weird kind of a space in their head where they're no longer in tune with their usual self. All right. And what kind of happens is that I think they start overthinking a lot, or rather they are daydreaming a lot, or they get lost in their thoughts a lot, and a lot of physical expression comes to a stop. In that, at least that's what happened in my particular case. All right. Because I said training, sex, all those physical expressions of being alive and being in sync with just your usual self, all of that had been lost. The person gets very much up in their head, and they normally withdraw a lot. They withdraw from a conversation. They're withdrawn when you're talking to them. They're withdrawn when you're having a text conversation with them. They're basically all up in here. Even if you meet them and all of you are meeting for something, they don't really seem to be in the moment and enjoying the experience. They would rather seem like they're lost somewhere. All right. So these would be the three different kinds of signs which I would tell you to look out for if you ever feel that somebody around you is going through some kind of a mental disturbance in their life. And lastly, a lot of times we often think that does that person really know that something is off about him, or do they know that they're depressed? As I just said, because they have been going through that journey and they're experiencing minute changes, for them is just being kind of their usual self, but they know something is off, but they do not fully know the reality of how badly they might be off their equilibrium. All right. So I think that is where this particular intervention kind of a thing comes in, where intervention is a very stigmatic term, or rather where intervention is the word which has a lot of connotations attached to it. But let's like, keeping that word aside, basically where you who are concerned, you think like, what can I do? And I'll get to that. Let me make another video, which would be the next video, on what you can do if you know someone is in depression. But basically, most of the times I would feel that the person really does not know. Why? Because a lot of people have a lot of ego, and I don't mean ego in the traditional sense of the word. I just feel in the sense of the word where it's very hard for people to think that something is wrong with them and believe that something is wrong with them, because people don't want to really feel that they are somebody who's weak or inferior. Even if it is a momentary thing, even if it is something which happens just once in a lifetime, they would not want to think that, okay, right now I'm not 100%. People love to believe that they're 100% or even better than that. All right. So this was the video focusing on how to know if someone is in depression or not. And if this makes sense to you, then and you want to now figure out what to do if someone is in depression, check this video out, because that's the next video which I'm recording right now. This one's gone too long, but hopefully it has helped you. All right. I'll see you soon.